Hello, my name is Danika and this is my speech on C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis is a well-known and beloved figure for many people. Due to the diversity of his accomplishments, people of different backgrounds, interests, and ages come together to enjoy C.S. Lewis's mastery in fantasy, philosophy, apologetics, literature, history, and many other topics he covers in his writings. However, not very many people know of his personal life. Lewis experiences many crucial circumstances that define his interests and lead to his prominent influence in literature and apologetics. Lewis was born in 1898 in Belfast, Ireland. From a very young age, Lewis developed his interest for literature due to the fact that his parents were quite bookish and they had very different preferred genres of literature. So Lewis always had a plethora of books to choose from. In his autobiography, Surprised by Joy, Lewis says, "I am a product of endless books. In the seemingly endless rainy afternoons, I took volume after volume from the shelves. I had always the same certainty of finding a book that was new to me, as a man who walks into a field of finding a new blade of grass." His passion for writing was ignited around the same time as his passion for reading was, when he was around 7 years old. Lewis attributes his early inclination for writing to an extreme manual clumsiness that he had, due to the fact that his thumb actually had one joint. So, because of that, he was unable to perform a lot of dexterous activities that required a lot of finicky movements with his hands. However, holding a pencil does not require a lot of dexterity, so that is the outlet with which Lewis channeled his creativity. Along with his brother, Lewis created this universe called Animal Land, a world where chivalrous mice and rabbits who rode out in complete mail to kill not giants, but cats. But this young novelist could not remain in his imagination forever. In 1908, when Lewis was just 9 years old, his mom died of cancer. The simple and innocent childhood Lewis had experienced up until then was immediately terminated. Lewis describes, "With my mother's death, all settled happiness, all that was tranquil and reliable, disappeared from my life." This event brought Lewis even closer to what he already was with his brother. However, sadly enough, it really ostracized him from his father. His father had always been an emotional and unstable person. So with this death of his wife, his father really just isolated himself and was not able to have a good relationship with either Lewis or his brother. In the same year, 1908, Lewis finally goes to school. Before then, he had an education. He was taught by his parents and by tutors. So Lewis refers to this new school as the concentration camp. The students call the headmaster there Oldie, and he abuses the children. They are hardly taught anything, and they are punished unjustly and randomly. Although Lewis and his brother tried to tell his father this injustice, his father is not one to have his mind easily changed, and he had heard good things of the school, and that is what he believed. Unfortunately, his brother and Lewis did not insist with this because they kind of thought maybe this is how it is in all the schools and not just theirs. Despite this unfair treatment that lasted a couple years, Lewis still remembered some positive events with his fellow classmates. He says, "I can even remember in those days what must have been the first metaphysical argument I ever took part in. We debated whether the future was like a line you can't see or like a line that has not yet been drawn. I have forgotten which side I took, though I know that I took it with great zeal." Because of the similar situation Lewis had both in his childhood and in school, with him bonding to those that had the same difficult experiences that he had and same enemy, a common enemy, Lewis developed a view of the world in which we two, or we few, stand together against something stronger and larger, a sentiment that can clearly be seen in the Chronicles of Narnia. After 2 years, this miserable school shut down, and Lewis was briefly switched over to a school in Ireland before he finally switched over to another school in England, where his brother also attended. It was during this time that Lewis really struggled with his Christian faith. His reason to abandon Christianity arose as he tortured himself every night, praying over and over again until he felt it was good enough or spiritual enough. And this just constant torture of his prayers not being good enough is what ultimately led him to abandon his Christianity. This, paired with his desire for the occult, which was awakened by the matron at the school there, did not help him at all. He had this extreme interest in anything that was supernatural and occultish. Also, during this time, Lewis developed this extreme infatuation for anything mythology. He describes it as almost a religious relationship that he held with mythology. In his book, he says that there was something very like adoration, some kind of quite disinterested self-abandonment to an object which securely claimed this right by simply being the object it was. So this rejection of Christianity and obsession with anything else continued for several years. In 1917, only a couple months as a student in the Oxford University, Lewis was enlisted to go serve in World War I. He was there for a couple months before he got wounded in 1918, and he was discharged and he returned to his studies in Oxford University. He studied there until 1924, and during that time, Lewis obtained a degree in Greek and Latin literature in 1920, philosophy and ancient history in 1922, and English in 1923. It was during the first couple years in Oxford that Lewis adopted for himself a new look, in which there was to be no more pessimism, no more self-pity, no flirtations with any idea of the supernatural, no romantic delusions. He maintained this perspective despite his former atheist friend's conversion to spiritual philosophies, which Lewis was very disappointed about, but he maintained his new look. A pivotal moment, however, came when he befriended a Christian during his English school. His name was Neville Coghill. Now, Coghill's friendship with Lewis made Lewis realize what he describes in his autobiography as a ludicrous contradiction between my theory of life and my actual experiences as a reader. What he means by this is that Lewis noticed that the writers whom he respected for having deep ideas and whom he had a sense of trust for, like George MacDonald, G.K. Chesterton, and John Milton, they were all Christians. Although this observation was impactful for Lewis, he disregarded it for many years. It was upon reading Chesterton's Everlasting Man that Lewis finally realized that Christianity had an intellectual basis. Lewis shares in his autobiography, "In 1929, I gave in and admitted that God was God and knelt and prayed. Perhaps that night the most dejected and reluctant convert in all of England." Lewis's unique childhood and education and his powerful testimony prepared him for the extraordinary works he would write as a Christian. His childhood love for fantasy, mythology, and creativity can be clearly seen in his books The Chronicles of Narnia, The Screwtape Letters, and Till We Have Faces. His difficult hardships that he had when his mother passed away of cancer, and then later in his life when his wife Joy passed away also from cancer, can be clearly seen in his books A Problem of Pain and A Grief Observed. And finally, his conversion is clearly the foundation for his more theological books like Mere Christianity and Miracles. These books and many other books he wrote have been the instrument through which many people have actually received salvation. At the end of Mere Christianity, Lewis beautifully describes to his readers the core message of Christianity. "Give up yourself and you will find your real self. Lose your life and you will save it. Submit to death of your ambitions and favorite wishes every day, and death of your whole body in the end. Submit with every fiber of your being and you will find eternal life. Keep back nothing. Nothing that you have not given away will really be yours. Nothing in you that has not died will ever be raised from the dead. Look for yourself and you will find in the long run only hatred, loneliness, despair, rage, ruin, and decay. But look for Christ and you will find him, and with him everything else thrown in." Thank you.